Alright, so I have a thing with files. But this time somebody else asked for another file knife, and they asked for it to be roughly the size of a Sharpie with the ability to put on and take off a lid. And while they didn't ask for it, a little brass bolster just for shits and giggles. The particular person is my brother, so he kind of gets the right to ask for it. But the intention is to have like a cap, but there was no way that I was going to be able to use a Sharpie as a cap. Adrian, thank you. But this file knife is being made out of the other half of the file knife that I used to make for my mom. Which is just neat. Go away. That being the case, when I hot cut it the first time, it left this little piece out of square, not out of square, out of flat by more than I really cared to have to fix. And there is a solution for that. Heat, hammer, couple taps, no one's any the wiser. Although in retrospect, I should have used a wood hammer for this, because I very gently pushed down the texture of the file, which is something that my brother wanted. He doesn't know that, though. Except that he does. Because I already gave it to him. But to get a rough idea of what I'm doing, just there's nothing wrong with making a sketch and double checking yourself constantly. Or at least once during the course of the project. But the shape of the blade being a chip carver, the flat side is the blade side. And it's only really beveled on one side too, making it pretty dang sharp. Some quality drawing right there, Lou. But it being a file knife and not having access to, if any fancy grinders indoors, almost the entire project is done with hand tools. Actually, I think outside of, oh god, I hate hacksaws. Sorry. Aside from one little Dremel tool that I use to help make the handle, in the future, this is pretty much it. Just one jackass at a bench. Going through way too much effort. Or just the right amount of effort. One or the other. One thing I will say about... Oh. I'm gonna make sure to turn that audio down. That is awful. One thing I will say... Shut up, Mickey Mouse. Is... limiting how much vibration you have on your bench. Sorry, watching it, it's nothing but shaking. The lower that thing is in the vise, the less vibration there is. The less vibration there is, the more energy goes into your cut. The more effective the hacksaw can be. Or the idiot using the hacksaw, one or the other. But very clearly, like, that immediately made a huge difference. It almost doesn't even sound like 3 cats dying in a field. There's nothing to say. I'm just captivated by eventually it working. Oh, sweet baby Satan, stop it. And for whatever reason, it decided to bind in the cut more than a few times, and I never really figured out why. using a magnet to keep down the mess and the potential metal being everywhere. Good idea. Yay! That little piece of metal, there's a decent chance that I'm going to try to turn that into something. I don't like waste. I don't like full rectangles of... Oh, I felt that in my spine. What's the opposite of asthma? Because I think this is it. But the little pieces of metal that come off of, like, stock removal knives and what have you, that's still perfectly good steel. If you take time to take a long straight cut, you can get another knife out of the knife you just made. Alright, so that nightmare sound, that's not happening again. For whatever reason, that part of the steel got harder than the rest of it, and there's no real way for me to fix that. But what I can do is oh, sorry, my spine still hurts. What I can do is I can file away this area by hand, and taking off small chunks and in corners really helps with like how much effort you have to put into it. You can always use a little more pressure, but it's ideal if it's not trying to take away a full thickness shaving in every push. At least from what I can tell. I've been doing a lot of filing these days. Speaking of a lot of filing, here we go. Here we go. Bueller. Thank you. Yeah. These big files, I am super impressed at how fast they go compared to what it could be. Like, I don't really have a good comparison for what fast is, but this is pretty fast, and I really, really like using them. They're heavy. I think they were $8 at the fairgrounds where I'm from. From a tent that was potentially a little shady, but it had it had a lot of tools, and I think this particular file's I should know the names of some of these. It was made in Mexico. It's a really good file. As long as I don't treat it too bad, it should last for a good long time. And when it's done, you fucking guessed it, it's turning itself into a knife. And I promise I'm not trying to intentionally misuse it just so that it can be a knife faster. But that would be cool. Yeah, I think this is probably about, I want to say 2 to 4 hours of filing. I don't really have a good gauge of time right now, but it was a fair clip. Not the back. The back actually did fine. I'm talking about the filing for the entire knife was relatively short. In fact, I think it could have been about 2 hours. I think a lot of things. It's neither here nor there. I am also... You can see me with a magnet every now and again collecting shavings. I have hoop dreams of making a canister Damascus out of all the high-carbon steel metal shavings that I've gathered from various projects, including this and another one after that, and they'll just keep coming. Like I said, I'm not a big fan of waste. Even though filings could be classified as garbage pretty easily. It'll be a fun experiment when it happens. No ifs, just wins. And that's where I realize I am not making it a Sharpie size completely. Because that cap will never go on, and taking it off would never be safe. I think I ran out of space because at some point... sorry, there's a couple squeakies in there. At some point, I file the shoulders down to be just about even. Yeah, I don't know why I started with the small file, but the big file does make quick work of flattening the back side of the knife. It does get a very slight radius, both due to my lack of skill and it's a little easier to sharpen that way. But one of the bonuses of that, since it does have a slight radius, it is a boss at carving and at that other thing, sharpening pencils. A lot of these little knives that I make have the purpose of sharpening pencils because, I mean, what better thing to whittle than a pencil? Well, probably wood. I mean, wood is the main thing that you whittle. If you whittle metal, call me. I'm using these little diamond stones and a diamond file just to really try to get down on there. I may or may not have gotten mixed up at some point and tried to file the wrong side of the blade flat for just a second. So looking back at these projects has given me a lot of perspective on how I could do things better. But for example, if I had just a little more room at the base of that bevel, I could make it more even from the get-go. Because I could get a full stroke from left to right, as opposed to all the attention the end's getting, and then having to go back and correct it on the inside. It's always good to be able to analyze yourself and try and do better the next time. But also not shit on yourself for trying the first time. It's pretty important to just try. Ain't nothing wrong with it. I really hate the Mickey Mouse voice. Sorry. Now switching to the smaller files takes away some of the more offending gouges in the knife, which would take way longer with sandpaper, so this is quite nice. And you can see a ball of shavings that formed in the background. You can bet your sweet ass that shit's getting saved. This was also maybe the second time that I took a knife all the way to sharp before the hardening. And it really doesn't seem to have any effect on blades this small, because it's easier to get a more even heat. So, from now on, hey, I kind of learned. Oh, squeakies. So from now on, if it's not a blade over an inch or so, if it's sharp, it's sharp. I also learned that you're supposed to get a knife to a certain thickness, and then the secondary bevel is what you do on a stone to get it sharp. I may or may not have understood that concept before doing any of this, like for the last year and a half. And by may or may not have, I mean I did not. But there's a burr across the entire backside of that blade. Granted, before it's hard, it's not even really a knife. It's just knife-shaped steel. But since it was a file, that they get stinking sharp. I'm not worried about its ability to become a knife. Come on, just get it off there. It's only 3 neodymium magnets. As you can see, tiny little box of dreams. And only some steel gets embedded in my thumb in this whole process. Not much, just some. And a heat treat. For a little home bench, I have not had a single problem heat treating into water. And I'm trying to focus, well, okay, I should have focused more heat into the base of the knife and the tang from the get-go. I think I just end up lucking out because it works on the first try. Yeah, much thicker or much longer, and it starts to get really hard to do this with just a little propane torch. Also, this file steel works, like the quench into water and with file steel works really nicely. I think another reason why I'm not experiencing a lot of cracks is because there's not a lot of there's zero hand forging that went into this one. And the previous knives that I made for a friend, they were also not, they were forged, but there wasn't any signs of cracking, which I like. Sorry, I went off on multiple tangents multiple times. The point here is I didn't get any warping, which is fantastic. That blade is hard as glass right now. But how do I know how hard that is? I finally got some little testers, and I can test it. Not this. That's a file from the same set that this file came from. And aside from scraping away some oxidation, it's not even touching it. But the hardness tester kit that I've seen twos of other people use, this has me excited because now I can know. And at least in the softer area of the tang here, it digs in. In the harder area, it does not. It's actually, oh, that's actually kind of hard to watch. But, moment of truth, 65 HRC file doesn't touch it. That's great. Still needs to be tempered. Thumbs up, dude. Checking to make sure it's like actually flat on the blade. It's pretty fucking good. Like I said, one dinky Dremel tool. And one really small wire wheel. My god. One of these days I'll have a garage, a shop, and I'll be able to do these things a little more efficiently. Not much more, but a little more. Alright, I believe this hasn't been tempered yet. Now it's been tempered. I've taken away some of the surface oxidation, but not much. You can see that it's gotten yellowish. And because I just am curious, we run up the hardness levels. 40 doesn't even know it's there. Good. 45. Same thing. You wouldn't know a difference. 50. I don't know what needs to be 50 HRC, to be perfectly honest. But things are getting harder because 55 is pretty hard, right? My little tempered knife is harder. Again, this is the first time that this happened. I was very excited. Now, 60 HRCs, that's almost as hard as I would want it, but I would want it harder. 60 HRC doesn't put any new scratches. Good. And 65. 65 just barely scratches the surface, which I think is more than acceptable for this knife. It will have a long, industrious life. And for some reason, it doesn't really touch the back. Like, aside from some of the thicker parts. So I feel like there's a slight difference in hardness in the front and the back. But its brother file doesn't do shit to it. It's good to know. You know, just to see if it shattered. A tempered knife shouldn't shatter because you tapped it on a wooden surface. That's 2 thumbs up this time. Apparently, I'm just going to make you watch me put all these things away. Okay, there we go. So I'd like to introduce you to Overzealous Adrian. I know the name of my channel's changed a couple times. Max Power is the name of my character from Cabins and Killers, the game that I play with some friends on the side for fun. Because, well, it is fun. Let me turn this into a Cabins and Killers commercial. Basically, it's a horror-based D&D game that we play on Twitch. Our DM is Jen the Strange. She's super fucking cool. But also, my character is Max Power, and he is a steel salesman, which may or may not have bled into my real life in more ways than I thought it would. And that is why that's why my channel name has changed again. But let me talk about Overzealous Adrian, which is actual me. I started hand sanding this before I was ready. I should have made sure that this thing was more flat. I should have done multiple things, but I should not have gone through the hand sanding process as of yet. This was wasted time and wasted effort. The reason I've left it in is because I think it's kind of important to see mistakes, especially if they're happening in real time, because this isn't sped up in any way at all. I'm just that good, which is a lie. That is a hard lie. But it was a learning experience, and I got a little better at hand sanding, so I'm not too mad. But thanks for watching. This is where the knife ends up. I'm really pleased with the blade shape, and I really like where it's going.